Journeys always start somewhere, and this one starts here. I'm looking for something, perhaps simply for where my journey begins, perhaps for where it's going next. I'm in the northwest of England, walking through Alderley Edge, a place where Cheshire, Lancashire and Greater Manchester meet. As far as this journey is concerned, I won't be leaving the northwest. I won't be straying far from these woods. I grew up in this area, and so it's where I've come to begin my journey through time. Past, present, future, all three things at once at a place where they meet, on the edge of whatever happens next. There are millions of things that could happen next. Millions of outcomes. As far as this journey is concerned, this is what happens next.
I used to come to Alderley Edge a lot as a child with my parents, and I used to look at that view and imagine that it was the future. It was vast and exciting and not a little scary. I didn't know where it began or where it ended. And I felt like I was poised between plummeting over the edge into a terrifying void or soaring off into a world of endless possibilities. The future was out there. It was the ultimate adventure, and there was nowhere else to go.
I'm interested in where the future comes from and how we can see it coming.
Is there an exact moment that we can pinpoint when the future arrives? Is there a time when we can say, yes, now here is the future? Of course, there isn't. Maybe from a vantage point of 30 years ago, you could look forward and say, yes, that looks like the future. And maybe the teenage me projected into 21st century Manchester Piccadilly would say, gosh, it looks like the future. For me now, looking at it, it's just the present. I recognise it. It's something I take for granted. Then again, I do think the teenage me would have been excited. Somewhere along the way, the future arrived. You couldn't really see it happen. It was just here. Maybe the future is in fact the past in a new disguise. A disguise we call for now the present. Can you imagine any questions I might be asking you later in the interview, for instance? I mean, could you predict what I might be asking you? What kind of questions?
But probably that's saying, can I think into the future?
Yeah.
Would you like me to suggest questions?
Yeah, what kind of questions do you think I'll be asking you?
Well, obviously time travel might come in somewhere. How can we measure time?
Could you predict into the future the kind of questions that I might ask you? No. What do you think I might be asking you? So, what are we going to talk about?
What do you want to talk about?
Whatever you want to. What should we talk about?
I think the sort of question is that when clearly semiconductors dominate our life now. I mean, we're really silicon technology.
Do you think I'll be asking you that question about a semiconductor?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, so that I can ask you that question, tell me what a semiconductor is.
Okay. Well, materials in nature can be broadly classified into three classes: conductors, which we all know, insulators, which we all know, and these ubiquitous semiconductors. Now, conductors just conduct. End of story. There's nothing we can do to make them do other things. Insulators do exactly the same thing. They just insulate, full stop. With semiconductors, we have the ability to change their state so that they go from a fully conducting state to a fully isolating state. And that is what adds a lot of functionality when we make an electronic circuits.
I couldn't say what's going to happen in the future. I'd be a millionaire if I did.
True. So we know that somewhere in the future I'll be asking you that question. Okay. Now...
no.
Oh, I won't be asking you that question.
No.
Why not?
No. Because I thought we were already starting with that.
Oh.
Now, any good futurist will tell you that you cannot predict the future entirely. You can tell things about the future based on present conditions and events that have happened in the past.
It's interesting that I should return to my past to find clues to where the future begins. Perhaps that's because it's a place like this, Jodrell Bank, that I feel that the future began for me, the idea of the future. Travelling through the Cheshire countryside on a train that passes just by, it seemed the most incongruous shape, this wonderful alien shape looming up out of the countryside. And it seemed so evocative of the future and possibility and what was out there. It seemed to point absolutely towards the future.
In fact, to be honest, it's more a place about the past. And the reason is that the farther out into space we look, the further back in time we see. In some sense, astronomers are the world's best historians. We can look back up to about 14,000 billion years. So that gives us a way of actually seeing how the universe has evolved through the eons. So in that sense, it is a bit about history. But also, we can learn about things. And then we can say, well, we know that that did that in the past, so this object here, we suspect will do that in the future. So it can help us predict what will happen to something else in the future.
So can you tell me anything, have I come to the right place to find out where the future begins?
We can tell you about, I think astronomers can, although astronomers, when we look out at the universe, we're actually looking into the past. Because we're always looking at it at a time when the light that we detect here was actually set off from the object we're looking at. By studying how the universe has evolved in the past, we can actually predict what's going to happen to it in the future.
Right. So there is a connection.
Yeah, so there is a connection. I mean, basically, if you see something, you could look at something rolling downhill, you can make a prediction that it's going to carry on rolling down that hill. So you've got to look at what it's done in the past in order to predict what's going to happen to it in the future.
It was Ralph Waldo Emerson who said that a moment in time is eternity in miniature. All that eternity behind us reminding us where we've been, and all that eternity ahead of us reminding us where we're going.
We know that there seems to be this arrow of time. Everything just marches forward. There seems no way of reversing that as far as we can understand. Although in some of the fundamental equations of physics, there's no real reason why it should be one way or the other. There are some laws that suggest things will go one way. If you have, let's say, a piece of steam that comes out of a kettle, is all concentrated at the exit of the kettle, but that then expands out into the space of the room. Now, we never have that coming backwards. It seems to be something that forces time to move forwards.
Could you maybe give me a hint of where you think the future begins? Does it begin in a millisecond and then it literally slips away? Does it begin in 15 minutes? Is there a point where it begins, or
Well,
is
I think
it in
it's
a way?
continuously occurring, really. Yeah.
So and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So it slips away.
Yeah.
So in a way, doesn't it?
I'm not a philosopher, so I'm not able to really.
So that enters a different kind of territory, really.
I think it does, really, to a large extent. Yeah. Yeah, in the sense. Yeah. I mean, I would say the present is actually a very hard thing to define.
Time can sometimes seem so fluid. It's as if you could move through it at will. Go wherever you want to go. The past, the future, even the present.
An explanation of why there was...
This is me asking Ian Morrison at Jodrell Bank if time travel is possible. It takes him 20 scientific minutes to argue that it isn't. The 20 minutes we have compressed into a few seconds, which, paradoxically, is a form of the travelling through time that Ian says is impossible.
And so the very fact that Einstein was right, we believe right, is necessary for us to be here. So I'm pretty certain you can't travel faster than the speed of light, and hence it's not possible to beat time travel that way.
It was a surprise to me that the people at Jodrell Bank were looking in an entirely different direction from the one I was expecting. But it did confirm to me that sometimes you do need to go backwards before you can go forwards.
It was always my ambition to go through the time tunnel. Where do you find a time tunnel? Well, here is a time tunnel, and I'm going through it. The thing about the time tunnel is you never know where you're going to end up.
We're coming to one of the oldest laboratories on the station, but it's almost our holy of holies because sometimes it keeps our time machine. It contains our atomic clock. Come and have a look.
Okay.
This is our fundamental...
Perhaps the future is the past in a new disguise, a disguise that for now we call the present. Have I already said that? Or will I say it?
But how do we know what the length of a second is?
Earth rotates once every 24 hours. There are 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. He has 86,000. So a second was 1/86,000th of a day.
So where does the future actually begin? Does it begin in an experimental scientist's lab, somewhere out there in space? Does it begin in our prayers? Perhaps it begins deep in the past, the moment of the Big Bang, the time we invented the wheel, sometime during the Roman Empire. Let's say for our purposes that the future began deep in darkest Lancashire, at the end of the 18th century, the start of the Industrial Revolution.
Inside the textile time tunnel, I found a guide who's going to take us through the innovations that happened because of industrialisation, explain the economic and social changes and pin down the past in a way that the future can never be pinned down.
How long is this going to take? We're going to do 300 years in what?
Well, it normally takes between half an hour and 35 minutes, and even longer if people ask lots of questions. We'll see how it goes, shall we, Paul?
Have you got a record that you've done it in?
A record? Yeah. Yes, I did it in 4 minutes for Radio Lancashire. I think they cut 1 minute out of it, but they were quite impressed with that.
Let's break that record then.
Okay.
Doreen does break her record and takes us in less than 4 minutes through 300 years of capitalist expansion, the emergence of new social classes, how rural life became urban life. We've reduced that even further to less than 40 seconds. She leads me to where we find an ancestor of the man who invented the spinning jenny. At school I was told that this was one of the most important inventions in British history.
We're related to James Hargreaves 14 generations ago.
Yeah.
We're actually related, a direct descendant from James Hargreaves' father's brother, Christopher. He was actually spinning a wheel, and the wheel fell to the floor, and that gave him the idea of the spinning jenny.
Because of inventions like the spinning jenny, by the beginning of the 18th century, the use of machinery was widespread. But can too much movement forward stop time in its tracks? When you have a revolution that creates such profound change, what gets left behind?
Did you work on these looms?
Yeah.
You worked on these looms now?
Yeah,
these
so they're
looms
all not
are incredibly loud, aren't they?
Yeah, clap, clap, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I've only 1 year left.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, and that's my year in it.
So how did you communicate? Were you allowed to communicate with each other?
Well, we used to shout,
What's so fascinating about the loom?
well, it's just, you know, how it works, isn't it? How it
And different
goes, you know,
patterns, what you get
the
on.
noises going, and you can be singing the way you feel like you're better singing than
when they were
Selector.
weaving well,
Yeah.
you know, but when it were bad, it were hard work,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Oh, there's moments of fluency.
Oh,
It's like,
yeah,
like
exactly.
it's like a musical instrument almost.
Yeah, it is, yeah. They're
Really,
everything's
when they
going, it's great.
You're swinging.
Yeah,
Yeah,
when
and you
everything's...
can talk and have a...
Yeah.
But when it was
So
weaving
yeah.
bad, because we all worked hard, you
Yeah,
know.
but everybody worked in together, you know.
I think every good thing comes to an end, and in 1990, in the recession, we had to close 200 shuttle looms down at Moscow Mill. What do we do with 60,000 square feet? Basically, we started a small retail enterprise selling bleach and washing up liquid and toilet rolls.
Like when I actually started in the shop at first, there were only 2 little places, and just not through and made it big when bigger, you know.
And Oswald Twistle Mills was born. And of course, it's not just about retail shopping, it's about attractions. We've introduced the Stockley Sweet Factory, the Textile Museum, and in this weaving shed where we are today, we have 3 1897 jacquard looms actually weaving.
And also you've moved into a kind of tourism as well here, in a way. It's like tourism of the past, isn't it? Visiting the past.
Yes. And rather than seeing how many orders for tablecloths, it's how many new coaches have we got coming in today?
Doreen finishes her quick trip through time, holding a computer circuit board to show how far things have travelled since the spinning jenny. What was once so modern becomes so quaint. For now, it's the computer that seems to be the next revolution that's throwing us forward in time.
I can say that, you know, in a way here in this little black box, that's where the future is beginning.
Yes, the next second is defined very precisely from the current one, and it will then count so many million beats, 1420 million beats, and then it's the next second.
Okay, so time begins here.
Absolutely.
In this sad little room.
Yes, it's very old. This was built in about 1948.
Yeah.
Still in use.
It's a beautiful little machine. It's like a time machine, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. It's the nearest, a bit like TARDIS too,
Yeah.
it's smaller. No, it's the nearest thing we have to a time machine in the sense it keeps essentially perfect time.
I'm going down this convenient time tunnel one more time. In the name of all that's holy in investigative journalism. Let's hope this time we end up in the future. After all, the past is just the past. One of the things that's interesting about why our tendency is to be nostalgic and to look for the coziness is the sense that, of course, to think about the future, to move into the future, to make the future happen, is ultimately an acknowledgement of death, really, because moving forward, that's where it's going to lead. So I think there is constantly that tension between wanting to remain embedded in a changeless, cosy past full of familiar things, things we know and understand, rather than moving into a future full of things that we don't quite understand, things that are new, that are unusual to us. I think it was the great Manchester City manager from the 60s, Joe Mercer, who said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. Or maybe it was the Cheshire Cat. Wrong place, wrong time. It needs another trip through the time tunnel. Now, I haven't been in UMIST for about 30 years. I was in once before to see the band Van de Graaff Generator play. I'm in it here again. I'm at basically the cutting edge of science, I would say, and we're going to take over the world.
This beautiful machine makes microchips. The smaller the chip, the bigger the machine. These chips are in phones, laptops, pets. Soon, they might be inside us to turn us on and off, or something more sinister. Or they just make your phone ring.
Why is the semiconductor so important? Now, you see, that was the question you predicted that I would ask.
Yes.
And I've asked it now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, semiconductors, of course, are all pervasive. I mean, at the moment, I don't think anybody would be able to conceive life as we know it without semiconductors. So when we are putting them in the machine...
My new friend Mo tells me that silicon is the best known semiconductor material, forming the basis of most integrated circuits. He actually prefers to work with gallium arsenide, a compound that makes him extremely happy to be alive. Hearing him explain his work gives you an understanding of how perhaps the best way to predict the future is to take a leap into the unknown.
Towards the center of this deposition.
So, would it be right in a way to suggest that the future, as it emerges, however it emerges, begins with experiments?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it is experiment that dictates where we go. So we cannot do away with experiment. I mean, experiment is the way to truth.
So that's and therefore in a way where the future begins, in experiment.
Yes. Yes. In the sense that it will guide us along the path we want to go down.
Yes. But would you say it's true in a way that you spend a lot of your time in a way then, because you're ahead of everybody else in the future, that you're more in the future than other people?
Absolutely. I think that is absolutely true. Because we always need to be that step ahead, because that is the nature of our work. We are always gazing ahead.
So I could describe you as a being from the future?
Maybe, yes.
What's it like then?
From my tiny corner, it's very exciting. But unfortunately, I don't have the overall view.
The process of making the program has led me to certain areas where I'm thinking I might be finding the future. And sometimes you think you find the future, like when you're in a Starbucks cafe and the buildings around you, and it seems very modern. It's a shape, it's a new way of spending your leisure time. Other times you think you're finding it in the way that people have ideas and the way that they think of the future. They want it to happen somehow. They need it to happen as a survival instinct. And I think I'm finding it there. The other way is that I think I'm finding it as quite a spiritual thing. It's almost like a kind of God. And the sense that the future is an illusion. The future actually doesn't exist.
This extraordinary church is being turned into flats, which is why the Reverend Batty and myself are wearing hard hats. Not because God is about to burst through the ceiling with an answer to my questions. Is it a step backwards that this once sacred place is being turned into apartments?
So you actually see it as a positive thing? You don't feel that somehow it's a betrayal of what it was or of what it could have been?
Oh no, things have always changed. Things must change. The church changes and
I'm looking towards religion as a way to understand something about the mysterious quality of the future. How it could be so close to us and yet so far away. In what way does faith help us deal with the uncertainty of what lies ahead?
So I'm lacking something by not believing in God?
if you don't believe in God, I would say definitely yes. You're lacking something.
Am I lacking the future?
You have a future. Hopefully it's one in which you find God.
Right. And how will God make that future for me then?
Ask him.
So will the future that God gives us, will that be an eternal future? Would it be eternity?
I'm certain there's more to this life than we know, and I think we all persist in some way. I don't need to know quite how, but I really believe we were made to be God's friends, and that's what Christ was showing us.
Yeah.
And it's a love relationship, and a love relationship doesn't stop, and death doesn't destroy it. So therefore I believe we'll live forever.
So that's what God will give you, certainly, eternity.
Yeah.
Not so much me.
I don't know that, and also I don't know how God's dealing with you in your life. But if God is saying to you, please pray, Paul, then you should do it.
Yes. And then my future will last forever.
If you ask God to bring you into His kingdom, I would believe that. I would suggest that you will find that you come to believe that as well.
That might not be do you think maybe future forever might be a bit uncomfortable?
I think it will be as marvellous as the present is. And it will be changing. It's certainly not sitting on a cloud, eating and drinking. It's a changing, marvellous thing, because creation is something that isn't going to stop.
I'm finding it in spaces, in mysterious spaces that can't in a way be explained, but in other ways can be explained, because you have to explain them for the future to exist. So I think in one way I'm finding that the future is like an illusion. It doesn't actually exist. We have to make it exist in the same way as when you make a television program, you're making something exist. So at the beginning of the television program, there was no future. And somehow we knew that there had to be in 28 minutes, i.e. there had to be an end to the program. So that is the way that we're finding the future.
Perhaps the best way we can get a glimpse of the shape of things to come is through what we build.
The Salford Quays is one version of a well-designed, well-planned future. You've got the Imperial War Museum, safeguarding and honouring our past. You've got the Arts Centre, celebrating the imagination. You've got the designer outlet, because the future is retail, the future is a logo. Plenty of office space. You've got the flats with a water view, because in the future everyone will have a water view. Now I'm going to be talking to Malcolm Sykes, a town planner who was a member of the team responsible for this heartening regeneration. Town planners tend to have a bad reputation. We think of them as bureaucratic blockers. But on the quiet, a town planner can be as visionary as any futurist.
Well, I think the story goes back to the early 80s, when clearly the docks were in decline because of changes in trade and shipping patterns, and we realised here it's such a big area that to see the docks decline, which was at the heart of the industry here in the northwest, that something had to happen.
Yeah.
So we had to create a new future out of our old past.
One of the things that I find fascinating is how things appear. Who thinks of them? Who thinks it up? Why did this thing happen? Who imagined 20 years ago that in 20 years' time there should be something like this?
Town planner has always got to be looking 10 years ahead. Yes. And trying to vision how things are going to be and actually make those visions come a reality.
but from its very seeds, when it was first decided that this was going to happen, was there an amount of scepticism maybe about it?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I've been here from '84, where people were saying, oh, this will never happen. And, you know, if I tell you that some of the plans for those days were to actually fill the docks in with waste material, that was the extent of vision that some people had.
But the thing itself is actually very flamboyant, isn't it?
Yes.
At what stage does that start to happen? When you've got over the initial scepticism and people believe that something could happen, and then in a way you're, in the good sense of the phrase, you're beginning to show off a little with some of the buildings that there are. I mean, what stage does that start to materialise?
I think you need some confidence. I think the dryness of it is you need money, you need funding, you need commitment, and all of that was coming both from the City Council and from the government. I mean, the City Council actually bought the majority of the site so that could actually happen. So that's the dryness, as it were. The vision is where our architects and designers come in, and we visualise that, and we take it around and get other people interested. And things start to grow, because certainly with the funding we had, we were able to do the landscaping.
20, 30 years ago, the word Salford was dusty and sooty, and you thought of you know, clogs in the past. And something like this glamorises the whole place and literally does place it in the future, the whole kind of area now. You feel you're in the 21st century.
Well, I'm very pleased you say that, because that's what it's the new revolution in the north. You had the Industrial Revolution, which turned it from a farming community and villages to industrial towns. As those industries decline, then you have to have a new future.
And what was it like for you to see it?
It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I mean, I actually come here for fun now.
Yeah,
I do, yes. I'm here once a week for fun.
And does it make you think of the future? You know,
yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, because what we're thinking is, here we can do this. Where are the next areas where we can spread this?
Yes.
And that's what's engaging us now.
So, as you know, on this programme, I've been on a quest to find the future. I mean, do you think I found it here?
I think you found part of it, yes. Undoubtedly.
There is a theory that the past, present and future happen all at once. And we have found the imagination and courage to separate them so that we can find a point to life and a space to live. A space for memories, talk, love, and indeed museums, telescopes, churches, microchips and architecture. We have organised time so that when we're going on a journey, we reach our destination knowing that there'll be another destination, knowing that something else is always around the corner.
Sometimes you find the future in something as simple as a shape jutting into the sky. Just something about the positivity of that and the abstraction of it. It seems to be that you found the future. Other times you find the future in the next thing you're going to say.